Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Skills Workshop Virtual Careers Fair. As you're aware, this month and next, we'll have over 40 companies featuring to tell you who they are and what they do and how they hire. So let me just say, Amundi are really excited to be part of this, and it's great to see so many of you have signed up to hear from us. So for those not aware, Amundi UK is part of the Amundi Group, headquartered in Paris. We're the largest European asset manager and part of the Crédit Agricole Group, 10th largest bank in the world. My name is Jace, and I'm the Comms and PR Manager at Amundi UK, and I'll be your host today. So I'm just going to share my slides. Over the next hour, we thought it'd be a good idea for you to hear from Olivier Boutet, Deputy CEO and COO, Ashley Fagan, Head of ETF Sales, and Chloe Burnett, Senior HR Manager. And together we'll introduce Amundi, run through what we do, different areas of our business, with a special focus on ESG, where Ashley will give you a flavor of our work in this space. Chloe will then talk about pursuing a career at Amundi and the skills we look for when interviewing candidates. So obviously, given the webinar setup, we won't see all your faces, sadly, but please do submit any questions you have over the next 30 minutes using the Q&A function, and we'll get through as many of them as possible at the end of the session. I'll now hand over to Olivier to kick things off with a little bit about his journey.
Thank you, Jace, and hello, everyone. So in a nutshell, a little bit about my journey, if you want to switch to the next slide. I started my career in IT, in the corporate investment banking world, and I evolved there for about 16 years, always working at the intersection of technology and the business. I moved to the buy side, as in asset management, 4 years ago, where I started with Natixis Investment Managers for 3 years, and then moved last year to Amundi. So I thought for this session, it might be interesting to cover a little bit about what we think about our experience here. So here are my 2 cents for today. Given the session you're attending, the one advice I would give is we all start somewhere. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's not that important to know where you start, provided that you start in an area that you like. The most important part is for you to be good at what you do to begin with, and to be good and outstanding at what you do at the beginning of your career. Please choose something you enjoy doing. That's the most important part. So if I wasn't here, what would I be doing? I'd love to be windsurfing or kite surfing. My wife would probably be very cross about this answer, but that's probably what I would enjoy doing. But more seriously, why am I here and what do I enjoy about my working day? I think the financial industry has an incredible richness because it's connected to the real world in all ways. It's connected to the political world, it's connected to the real economy, to entrepreneurs, to companies, it's connected to social bodies, organizations. So once you work in the financial industry, you get to be exposed to the whole world around yourself. And this is going to be my second 2 cents, so that's going to make a total of 4 cents today. Once you've started in your journey in the financial industry, remain curious about things. We talk a lot about diversity. Diversity starts at an individual level, so remain curious and learn about all the different areas that your industry is connected to. So if you want to move now, Jace, to maybe a quick introduction, video introduction to Amundi and who we are, what we do.
In a rapidly changing world, where the truths of yesterday are destined to become tomorrow's uncertainties, how do you decide who is the right business partner for you? At Amundi, our objective is to be a trusted partner, working every day in the interest of our clients and society. This principle has inspired our activities for over 10 years. We pay close attention to the needs of each and every client and offer the investment solutions most suited to them. We share our understanding of the world with them through the expertise of our investment professionals. We are committed to responsible finance and investment processes that incorporate environmental, social, and governance criteria at their very core. We work with the world's largest institutions, putting environmental transition within the reach of everyone. And we are present across the world, close to our clients. This is how we earn your trust on a daily basis. Amundi. Confidence must be earned.
Thank you. So just to come back a little bit on what you've just seen, Amundi has 4,800 employees. We're present in 35 different countries, and we have 6 different investment centers in the world. We are the largest European asset manager, and we manage 1.8 trillion euros currently. Thank you. As you have seen, we provide and we're capable to provide a full range of solutions and expertise to a very large breadth of types of clients. So in terms of types of solutions, and the ranges of expertise, originally Amundi 10 years ago started in the fixed income field, but we now cover really a large breadth from equities, real assets, multi-asset, treasury, advisory, passive investments, and now technology quite recently. And we offer that to a full breadth of clients. So retail investors who are individual like yourself and myself, who will place their savings, all the way to corporations and institutionals such as pension funds or insurance companies who need to manage money, and all the way to government sovereign wealth funds who need to build their reserves on behalf of their citizens. So if we move forward, we've covered this. You'll have these in the slides when we circulate them. Where do we stand today? Amundi's ambition is to be at the forefront of the industry, and that's both in terms of results, of course, but we are really aiming at being leaders on a number of subjects that we believe are part of our DNA. And you will hear a lot later on about responsible investment. Amundi is committed to invest and remain at the forefront of the industry on this topic. So in a nutshell, our priorities are to keep developing Amundi and keep the growth of our business. 3/4 of our growth over the last 10 years was organic. We also want to keep developing ourselves internationally. You've seen we're a very international company. But for example, a couple of years ago, we launched a JV in India. Since last year, we've launched 2 JVs in China. So clearly, expansion in Asia is a priority for us. And we will keep on developing our business in all the different locations where we are present. One important aspect here is that in the asset management industry, size actually matters, because we want to leverage on the size of our business to keep costs down, both for our investors and for our clients, as well as for us. This brings a capacity to keep investing on the strategic topics and our differentiated areas of expertise. So I've already talked about responsible investment. Technology would be the other one. The asset management industry, you will have heard, is changing quite quickly, as many other industries, and the importance of technology is growing at the moment. So it is very important for us to use our industrialized model to be able and to free ourselves to invest in these areas. So that's the company in a nutshell. I will now pass on to Ashley, who will get into some of the details of what I've just covered.
Thank you, Olivier, and good evening, everyone. Great to be here today. Jace, can we go forward one slide, please? So a little bit about me. I was born in Canada originally, but I've been living in the UK now for 15 years. I am the mother of a 3-year-old and expecting my second child, so at the moment quite heavily pregnant. And in terms of where I started, I studied in Canada, but I actually, my first job when I was 17 years old was as a bank teller. And at that point, I didn't know that I was going to be pursuing a career in finance. And as Olivia said, I think, it's not so important maybe knowing exactly what you want to do from day one, but it's about doing something that you enjoy. So I ended up doing quite a few internships actually at different financial institutions in Canada, which I really enjoyed. And then I ended up as a graduate in investment banking in structured finance. So something very different to what I'm doing right now. But was really drawn to asset management during the financial crisis in 2008. And the reasons for that were really because I guess investment banking and the financial crisis both sort of taught me what I really enjoyed doing and what sort of what my values were. So I think, as Olivia said, it's really important to, to do something that you're going to enjoy, you're going to be able to put, drive behind and you enjoy doing, because it's of course going to be, I think that the early years, the hard work ethic is really important. And then as I said, I was drawn to asset management because I think the element of being a fiduciary to our clients, of being able to serve clients in that way where your interests are always behind the clients, was really important to me. And the financial crisis kind of amplified that. And the things today that I guess I enjoy the most about my role are consistent with that. So as I mentioned on this slide, you can see, so working with a diverse range of people, serving clients, helping to bring sustainable solutions to investors, which I'll come on to in more detail. If we can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So responsible investing, this is a really important point when we're discussing. So Olivier already discussed this sort of at the high level about who Amundi is as a firm. And actually it was a founding pillar of Amundi. So our commitment to social and environmental responsibility was one of the 4 key founding pillars of Amundi. And it still today is a core value and really part of our DNA. And you can see here, we are also very proud to be one of the founding signatories of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing. We were a signatory back in 2006, which is long before, let's say, this was a mainstream trend. And we're very proud to be rated A+, which is the highest rating, which we achieved again last year for the 6th consecutive year. Now we have a short video to share with you, just sort of highlighting our experience and why we think it's really important to be a leader in this space.
The demand for more sustainable practices cannot be ignored. As a leader in ESG, we believe it falls to us, Amundi, to lead the way, to drive our industry forward, to never shy away from taking a stand. It's easy to talk the talk when it comes to sustainability, but as our voting and engagement track records have shown, we aren't afraid to walk the walk. Our action taking is one of many traits that make us fit to lead the ESG transformation. Another is our history. Some may argue that history belongs in the past. We believe it provides a foundation for our future. It informs our wealth of expertise and shows our long-term commitment to ESG. This is not just a trend that we follow. When Amundi was formed, responsible investing was chosen as a core value. 10 years on, we're proud it still is. While some competitors are being dragged into the ESG world, we're here because we want to be. And now, we are showing others the way. Our know-how is aided by our Europeanness. Europe has led the ESG revolution with early adoption, advanced regulation, and sophisticated investor demand. Being European, we have more experience than most in responding to ESG requirements. But if there's one thing experience has taught us, it's that there's no one-size-fits-all ESG solution. Our comprehensive range has been carefully designed to meet the evolving needs of all our investors. Our flexibility is also an integral part of this. We committed to listen, understand, and innovate with and for clients, using our skill, structure, and openness to build custom solutions to meet their needs. But if ESG is reserved for only a privileged few, what impact can it have? We're determined to democratize sustainable investment, and our ETFs are key to achieving this. Through their cost effectiveness, we ensure investors aren't penalized for choosing sustainability. We know that green comes in many shades. Amundi has one to suit every investor. That's why we're leading from the front when it comes to ESG transformation.
Right, so I hope that short video was insightful on why this is such an important topic for us at Amundi. If I turn back to the slides, the next slide. Perfect. If we look for a minute at why investors are adopting responsible investing, so why does it matter to them, or ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. There are, let's say, 4 different pillars here in terms of key factors, or often a combination of these that are driving the investor demand. And this includes investors looking to align their investments with specific values, for example, ethical or religious values, where they have a preference to, to exclude companies that are involved in certain activities, for example. We also see them looking at it as a way to manage long-term risks. So if you look at operational risks, this means, for example, if you think about how a company's operations might be impacted by climate change, for example, take the risk of severe flooding like we've seen recently in Germany, and even in parts of the UK, or tropical storms that have hit the US. This can significantly impact business operations. There's also the reputational risk of a company that's involved in a controversial activity, or a company that is not meeting their environmental or social obligations, that can also reduce the value of an investment. In the third pillar, we see this as an area that is increasingly driving investors' demand for these products, which is where they're looking to have a real impact with their investments. So, for example, ensuring their investments help to reduce climate change. Finally, we're seeing also increased evidence that not only does ESG meet a lot of non-financial goals, as we've just discussed, in terms of specific values and generating impact, but it's also starting to deliver sustainable performance. And in many cases, we are now seeing ESG outperform non-ESG products. So it's quite an interesting development as well. If we move on to the next slide. Here, just looking at the global landscape of responsible investment. So it's quickly become very significant, both in terms of total assets and in terms of growth. It's now nearly 36% of total global assets under management, representing a whopping 35 trillion, which is absolutely massive. And as highlighted in the short video that you just watched, Europe was really a pioneer when it came to responsible investment. And indeed, you'll see that a large proportion of the overall global assets at 12 trillion are actually sitting within Europe. However, the US and other regions are catching up. So that is also becoming now significant, both in terms of size and the growth rates. One area that we've seen a particularly high rate of growth in is ESG ETFs. So first, I just wanted to give a quick intro to ETFs in case you're not overly familiar with them, and then we can look into that investment trend a little bit further. So exchange traded funds, or ETFs, as they're often referred to, are investment vehicles that are listed on an exchange, for example, like the LSE or London Stock Exchange. This gives them similarities with both direct stocks like Apple or Amazon, for example, and with traditional mutual funds that you might be more familiar with as well. So it's really interesting because it gives investors exposure to markets by replicating as closely as possible an index, for example, FTSE 100 or S&P 500, giving investors a very diversified access to all different types of investments. And some of the key benefits they offer, they are very cost effective, generally carry a much lower cost compared to actively managed funds. They offer diversification, as I mentioned, which is obviously a key risk management tool for investors trying to avoid, single company risk by diversifying across hundreds of companies, but still getting that exposure to the market you're looking to invest in. Accessibility, I think this is a really important one, as ETFs are widely available and easy to trade for all types of investors, from individuals like you and me to very large institutional clients like sovereign wealth funds or central banks even. So it's a very interesting tool from that perspective, and I think quite unique in the world of investments, where you pay the same fee regardless of the size of investor you are. Also, I think transparency is a really important element. So ETFs track publicly disclosed indices that have very transparent rules-based methodologies. And the portfolio holdings are usually published on provider websites on a daily basis, so you can always know what's in your portfolio and what you're invested in. And there's a great deal of choice. So with over 7,000 ETFs available globally, investors have a wide breadth of choice to match their investment views and goals, everything from well-known equity exposures, like I mentioned, FTSE 100 or S&P 500, to very specific ETFs that align with climate goals, like the Paris Agreement, and thematic ETFs like artificial intelligence or smart cities, just to name a few. Just moving on to the next slide, I think just to finish up, just on the topic of ETFs, today the market is 7.7 trillion. So it is an area that is fast growing on its own and innovative, and really helping to democratize investing, allowing investors of all types to invest in this way. So when you then combine it with ESG, this becomes a very powerful tool. So you can see these two growth trends now on this chart, with a huge acceleration in ESG ETFs. With over the past 10 years, we've seen it grow from over 50 ETFs to well over 600. So very, very significant, and assets growing from 23 billion to 293 billion over that same period. So it's been a significant amount of growth. And just looking at 2020 on the next slide, you'll see this trend is not slowing at all. 51% of all ETF flows in 2020 have gone into ESG ETFs, and it's been a very similar story this year. So as you saw in the video, ETFs are a really important tool when it comes to leading the ESG transformation. Given this point I made around allowing all types of investors, to have access to an investment tool that can help to make an impact. And that means that more investors that can, direct investments towards positive change and responsible investing, the more that are able to do this, the more obviously impacts we can have on areas that are important to us, like climate change. So I think that's a really important point. And then finally, on my last slide, I think it's really important to highlight how Amundi also uses its scale and fiduciary duty to our underlying investors to use our voice to help tackle the climate crisis and address social issues through our voting and engagement with the companies we are investing in. And I think this is a really, really important point. As you can see, we can do this by engaging with companies to help them align align, for example, their practices with the goals of the Paris Agreement, to set specific greenhouse gas targets aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement, to focus on social issues like reporting on human rights in operations and supply chains. So these are really important things that Amundi can use its scale and its voice on behalf of investors to really make positive change and encourage positive change. And you can see Amundi's leadership in this space. This is an independent source called Share Action, their Voting Matters report from 2020. You'll see Amundi is rated the highest out of all of the these are the major ETF providers actually in Europe. We have the highest rating when it comes to our voting track record across climate and social issues. I will stop there and hand over to Chloe.
Thank you very much, Ashley. And evening, everybody. It's lovely to have so many people joining us this evening. I'm planning on kind of touching upon, I suppose, pursuing a career at Mundy, and also giving you a bit of a flavour of what it's like to work at Mundy, and kind of maybe looking at some skills that we look for when interviewing candidates. So Joseph, if you just don't mind moving to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a bit about myself. I was born in Oxford, so I went to school in Oxford, and then went to the University of Southampton to complete a degree in physical geography. Very bizarre, I know. You may have thought that you would want sort of human geography in terms of pursuing HR, but again, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school, and so for me, I kind of kept my degree and skills relatively high level because I didn't know if I wanted to do anything vocational. So again, it kind of just shows that your career doesn't kind of pin you down and sort of stop you doing kind of any opportunities that you do want to pursue. I then later went on to study my master's part-time in HR management, which I did alongside work. Again, obviously, I'm mindful that a lot of you are kind of in the midst of graduating or soon to be graduating, and maybe looking at other opportunities to pursue further studies, and whether it's now the right time to do it, should you do it later. So again, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but I think just be mindful of, again, you can get a lot of exposure when you sort of take on a new role, and kind of commencing studies when you do that. It's just obviously being prepared to, I suppose, manage your time well, and kind of studying alongside work. Definitely is challenging, but it is definitely doable as well. My first job was actually as a HR coordinator at Fitch Ratings, and then I sort of remained in HR generalist roles. I've been at Mundy now for just over a year, so started in the midst of the pandemic, which, as you can imagine, was a very different onboarding experience maybe to normal, but really enjoying the role. And yeah, as you can see, here's just a picture of me and my little cockapoo Stanley, who may or may not make an appearance tonight, so apologies if so. Jace, if you don't mind moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So what I'm kind of going to do here is a bit of a hybrid in terms of, I suppose, what it's like to work at Mundy, and touching upon our, I suppose, our D&I commitment. So I would say Mundy is an exceptionally collaborative environment. I think one of the things I love working at Mundy is definitely, as kind of Olivier and Ashley have kind of mentioned, we have a huge global presence. I think that's really beneficial in the sense of kind of resources, having accessibility, a lot of kind of internal mobility options. But also in that sense, if I think of Amundi UK, I suppose, compared to maybe some of our peers and competitors, we're relatively small in that sense. So there's about 180 of us here in the London office. It's really great because everybody knows each other. They work exceptionally collaboratively across teams. And again, I think that you're not sort of a small fish in a big pond, and definitely sort of recognised throughout your sort of career at Amundi. And I think this sort of came in really handy when we were looking to launch our D&I commitment. We absolutely knew that we needed that buy-in from our senior leadership team. And as you can see here on the slide, we are fortunate to have 2 of our ExCo members as members of our D&I committee. But also in tandem with that, I think we were kind of able to work with our employees, and they are aware of their responsibility. In order to make a change, we all have to be, I suppose, responsible in some shape or form. And it was really great actually that we had volunteers from across sort of different areas from the business, as you can see, who had a real sort of passion and drive to make change, and really sort of push our, I suppose, kickstart our strategy. And so I suppose we then sort of looked at building our commitment and our committee and building out our strategy. As it stands, we currently have sort of 3 main work streams from that, which look at attracting and recruiting talent. So again, I suppose that's focusing on getting candidates like yourselves sort of in Amundi, getting our kind of name out there and having that diverse pool. The second tranche looks at the development and the retention of our current employees. So, for example, looking at talent and succession, development plans for individuals, looking at our family policies. And again, for example, we've rolled out our agile working policy more recently as a result of COVID. And again, we've been sort of really fortunate that we've had sort of a lot of feedback from the business and are able to reach out to our employees to actually understand what they want to see as well, which has been really great in terms of us sort of being able to kickstart this. And then finally, we have our corporate culture work stream. And I suppose this is a bit of a kind of holistic work stream, but this is sort of where we have begun, I suppose, the education and training around D&I. So, for example, we've recently rolled out mandatory D&I training, but we've sort of were very mindful when launching that we wanted it to be interactive, insightful, and for sort of employees to have their say, to make sure, again, that we are reaching out to all individuals, all levels of sort of D&I education and awareness. We've also been really fortunate, actually, as part of that corporate culture work stream, to have a number of external speakers come and speak to us at Amundi, which is a joint initiative with our Amundi Ireland office. We've had Nigel Owens, who some of you may know as a rugby referee, and we also actually had Nicholas Hamilton last week. And again, great speakers, really insightful, and again, feedback has been really positive. So again, as part of our, I suppose, D&I commitment, we can kind of speak to our employees and understand what they want. And again, as part of that, you can see that we are members of the Diversity Project and the Investment 2020. And we also signed up to the Women in Finance Charter in 2019 with quite an ambitious target. But we're sort of plugging our way through that and making sure that we kind of reach out and sort of hold ourselves accountable and get sort of that buy-in from our employees as well. So Jason, if you don't mind moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So candidate profiles, I suppose, what do we look for when we are interviewing candidates? So for us, we want individuals that are passionate, not only potentially about kind of Amundi as a company, but also about their role. What is it in particular that draws you to that role, to that team? Again, this is where I think it's really important that you kind of dedicate your research around that. And again, we're not expecting individuals to know the ins and outs, but I think it's really important that you can demonstrate your passion there. As I said, I think we want individuals that are motivated and driven, given that I suppose we are a relatively flat structure and teams are relatively small compared to larger organizations. It's having people that are proactive and self-starters, and I suppose eager to learn. And as I said, we don't expect candidates to hold and possess kind of all the right skills and knowledge, but again, it's just having that right attitude. Slight caveat to that, I suppose, is that again, you'll see perhaps when you come across some of our roles that there are specific skills. For example, a quant role may require Python experience or programming experience, etc. So again, there are a few nuances, but generally it's sort of having somebody with that right attitude, someone that's willing to learn. And as I said, Amundi is very collaborative. I think whilst teams are maybe slightly smaller in Amundi UK, it doesn't mean that you will have exposure to kind of the other teams kind of cross-culturally in different jurisdictions, but also you have your specific roles and responsibilities, but it doesn't mean at all that your remit and your role certainly won't broaden. We are really sort of keen for when individuals in a role and performing that we can provide them more exposure, more learning, more skills, etc. And again, I think that those smaller teams really help in that sense that you are sort of very much kind of rolling your sleeves up and mucking in with a lot of tasks that may actually fall outside your remit. So again, coming in at that more junior level, whilst it may kind of initially, as Olivier said, it may not be that first role that you're anticipating you end up in. Actually, the skills that you can get at a team within Amundi, not sort of being a small fish in a big pond, means you get that exposure a lot quicker than you may do elsewhere. Jason, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So opportunities at Mundy, in particular Mundy UK. So I know there were some questions kind of around internship program that are popping up. So slightly different to maybe some of the other webinars that you've listened to over the last couple of weeks. We don't have a formal graduate or internship program per se. Our roles are more on an ad hoc basis depending on business needs. However, for example, currently we have 14 interns and graduates across multiple different business lines. So again, ranging from front office to middle office and also support. So again, please don't be put off by the fact that there's not kind of loads of opportunities necessarily in front office roles. You can still get exposure, for example, in middle office. And again, we're really strong on encouraging internal mobility. So again, you may get a role, apply for multiple roles and get another role, and it gives you the opportunity maybe later on to move to another role internally. So it's something that we are sort of really strong and want to encourage as well. We've put the links here for our jobs board. So again, I would say please keep an eye on our website for any kind of live jobs, and also LinkedIn, as we do post all jobs up there. Again, as I said, we don't have a specific time frame when these open, so I would just kind of strongly encourage you to keep on referring to our websites and sort of seeing those opportunities that do pop up. Jace, just on to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. And just finally, the last slide that I wanted to touch on, I suppose, is interview prep and tips. Again, I think given that we are now in the, I suppose, the more virtual world than we ever used to be, whether it's sort of video or face-to-face, we would say please dress smart. It's always better to be overdressed than underdressed. And again, I know it's tempting that sometimes if you've had interviews in the past whereby the interviewer may be more casual, we would sort of always recommend that it's better to sort of be on that smarter end, and then maybe gauge that dress sense later on down the line, perhaps if you are successful within the role. Please also ensure eye contact, again, whether that's in person or looking directly at the camera. Again, I know nerves always set in, and sometimes you may have some bullet points or notes to help you out, and that's absolutely fine. But again, it's always really helpful to be kind of engaged with the interviewer and to make sure that you keep up that eye contact throughout. If it's virtual, we would say please test any tech before the interview starts. I know I've had it a few instances where I haven't maybe been as prepared, or I'm running late, and then you have to open a Zoom meeting and there's a new update, and it can sort of delay you slightly. So I would say always test in advance so you're able to access the platform that your interview will be on. And again, it may sound silly, but just make sure that you're sat somewhere quiet where you won't be disturbed. Make sure your phone's on quiet, and that perhaps if you live with other housemates, etc., that they know not to disturb you where you are. Looking at, I suppose, the actual interview, I would say definitely take a note of the job spec and review that in detail. As I said, I'm kind of aware that you may not necessarily have all the knowledge for all the kind of responsibilities in the job spec, but again, look at those specific skills that are stated and use that to think of examples of where you've demonstrated this. Again, it's always great if when you're asked a question, if you can lead, sort of explain and then give an example yourself rather than maybe being prompted to provide that example. It just again shows that you're kind of thinking through the answers and sort of being on the forward foot of that. As I said, ensure that you've researched the company and the area you're interested in. Again, you're not expected to know the ins and outs, but it's always good to know a bit about Amundi, kind of what hot topics are, hot in the news and things like that, and the team. So again, do those that research on LinkedIn of the team and also the interview panel. And obviously don't be afraid to ask questions. This is an opportunity as much as it is for you and us. It's very much a two-way street. You need to know that actually, is this the right role for you? Is this the right company for you? And it's the same as we want to make sure that you're the right individual for us. So don't be afraid to sort of ask those questions at the end to make sure that you've kind of addressed any concerns that you might have as well. And finally, be yourself. Again, I know nerves very much do set in. But hopefully sort of as you progress through the interview, you'll sort of slightly feel at ease. I don't think many of our managers are too taxing, and I hope they will be quite pleasant when they're interviewing you, and they want to obviously see you and kind of be personable as well. So again, be yourself and take that opportunity to ask questions. So that's everything I have to cover from my side. So I think we're going to hand back over to Jace.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Olivier, Ashley, and Chloe. So without further ado, we'll move on to questions with the remaining allotted time. So we've got a question here. What would you say differentiates Amundi from other asset managers? Who would like to take that one?
Do you want to go ahead, Ashley? Or should I?
Go for it if you want. I think you would know my answer, so up to you.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, don't
Okay,
worry.
okay. I think my answer was clear. I think the question came before my section, but if it wasn't clear, I mean, I think responsible investing and ESG is clearly something that we believe we have a differentiated angle on, and mostly in that we are a true pioneer. We aren't just following, you know, a trend. As you've seen, obviously there's been significant growth in the past well, in the past 12 months, in the past 24 months. But we were, you know, we made a commitment to this space long before that. As you saw, we were one of the founding signatories back in 2006. It was a founding pillar of Amundi, and we truly believe it's part of our DNA. So I think that's a true differentiating point. And I have worked at other asset managers for many, many years. So I can, you know, hand on heart say it is different at Amundi. But more broadly speaking, I think it's really exciting to be part of a firm that, you know, we are Europe's largest asset manager. We're in the top 10 globally, but we still have quite an entrepreneurial spirit. And, you know, you can have a real impact. As Chloe mentioned, there's an opportunity to work not just in your own role, but have a lot of, I think, interaction with other roles. And in that context, obviously, you know, have a very quick learning curve and get lots of exposure. So that's what I would highlight.
Okay, I might add to that maybe the DNA of Amundi starts within also as being part of a retail banking group or two retail banking groups in France. And we haven't bombarded you with numbers, but about half of our assets under management actually come from retail, as in from real people, real companies, and the real economy that you would meet on a daily basis. We're also pretty big on the institutional part of the business, but I think the fact that we sell our products to individuals comes also with a set of values and with a set of and a notion of what client services means and responsibility vis-a-vis their clients that makes Amundi make decisions in the long run rather than in short-term approaches.
Thank you. Move on to another question. Actually, I'm going to ask Ashley to pick this one up. Ashley, could you please speak more about how you've been able to fit in having children with having such a successful career?
That is a very good question. Well, I think it comes down to being able to work for an employer who values flexibility. You know, I think Mundy is definitely a firm that emphasizes the importance of family. So I've never had any issues where there's been, you know, family emergency or an important appointment that I needed to attend. But also having a support system. So, you know, whoever that is, whether it be family. So I've been fortunate enough to have some family around to help in the early years. But I know many people in similar situations and similar roles who have, you know, different solutions with paying for extra help and things like that. So it's definitely possible, but you do need some extra support at home just to I would say stay on top of things on both sides. And I think it's always difficult for mothers who probably try to do too much in both instances, but I've been quite fortunate to have a husband who's quite hands-on as well. So that has helped a lot with allowing me to focus on work when I need to, but flexibility is definitely a key element as well.
And I would say, just as an extension from that, I would say Amundi is not a particularly bureaucratic place to work in that sense. I think, yes, we trust our employees that in terms of, again, and I think COVID's been a true sign of allowing individuals having to work from home and getting that work done. And I think we've really been able to kind of see that and work our policies and processes around that. And again, we're not saying we're getting everything right, but I think, again, we very much want to understand from our employees what they want to see, what's going to help them. Obviously, again, we appreciate people have family lives and you want a good work-life balance. So again, we want to hear from our employees to know how we can improve that as well. So yeah, I hope that has sort of helped Ashley in that sense, and will continue to help others at Amundi in terms of when they do have other responsibilities outside of the workplace.
Thank you. We've got another question. I'm happy to pick this one up. Why hasn't Amundi entered the Chinese market? It was briefly covered in Olivier's slide, but we actually were the first foreign asset management company to be granted the ability to have a majority stake in a wealth management joint venture in China. So that was granted in 2019 off the back of the liberalization of the wealth management industry in China. So, and you'll have seen in the news actually a lot of American and European firms are now establishing operations in China. So we were fortunate to have done that work previously. And we've got 2 joint ventures, one with the Bank of China and one with the Agricultural Bank of China, where we deliver wealth management products to a very growing client base there. So we're talking, hundreds of millions of customers in that market. So it's very promising, and we'll definitely be growing our presence there. Thank you. We've got another question. Perhaps might give it to Chloe. What salary expectations should apprentices, interns, and grads have while beginning their career within the industry?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would say, I mean, in all honesty, financial services isn't overly transparent in terms of, I suppose, paying kind of what they offer at that level. I would say that we are very competitive within the market. I want to make sure that we obviously are aware when individuals come to interview that they're likely to potentially have other opportunities. So yeah, again, I would say that we're very competitive with our peers in terms of looking at salary expectations, benefits, etc.
Thank you. Got one other question. This one was for Olivier, and also tag along a second one that might be for you. Olivier's in the office. What's the work-life balance at Amundi? I'm also in the office. And then the second one is what attracted each of you to Amundi? What keeps you there? And I thought maybe it'd be interesting for Olivier to pick that one up as one of our more recent joiners.
Okay, so on the first one, I can talk about our agile working arrangement. Since we've come back to the office and we reopened the office, the Amundi offers flexibility in the way that we ask people to be present in the office for 3 days a week, and we give up to 2 days work from home. We do this because we believe that the value of Amundi comes from our collaboration, from the fact that we can work together and we can be together. Amundi doesn't nearshore or externalize functions. We keep almost all our functions together with the business always. That's again part of our DNA. So we believe in working together and being together. So that's the arrangement. And in terms of work-life balance, I do believe that it actually is a better source of work-life balance than being having had this experience for a very long time on my own, or not on my own, but working, in the flat where the whole family is all together at the same place. So we do believe that this is a good way to get the best of collaboration, and as well as being flexible and offering flexibility. So this is where we are currently. In terms of maybe the second question, why did I choose Amundi? I think Amundi is a company that is very transparent and very clear on what it focuses on. So what you see in Amundi's communication is really what you get. If we look at our individual priorities are all very much aligned with the communications of the priorities made by our CEO. The direction is very clear, and it's a company which is committed to invest. And you saw that in the ESG video, walk the walk and walk the talk. So basically, if we are saying that responsible investment and technology are things we are investing in, this is really the case, and everybody is really incentivized to work together. We talked a little bit about this. Amundi is an entrepreneurial company. The 3 values that you get when you arrive here is you're told Amundi believes in courage, solidarity, and entrepreneurial spirit. That's really true, and that's what I found quite attractive for an asset manager of this size.
Thank you. We've got a more practical question, which I'll ask Chloe to pick up. Do you sponsor tier 2 visas for international students?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when obviously again, kind of looking at roles, visas are certainly something that we would consider. Obviously, as part of the process, we sort of get a number of applicants and candidates through. So we review that on a case-by-case basis. And obviously, if a visa is required, then we'll absolutely consider that. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got another question. How important is your degree when applying to Mundy? And I think Chloe, you touched on that in your slide.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, again, I think it depends obviously on maybe the position you're applying for. I think, as I said, if you're able to demonstrate your skills alongside your degree, great. Obviously, there may be more specific roles that require that sort of financial background. So again, I think it really does kind of depend on the role that you're applying for. But I would say definitely don't let your degree necessarily hold you back from applying. I think if you're able to, as I said, demonstrate, if you sort of get to that stage kind of talking through sort of an interview process, and be able to kind of relate some of those skills to the role, and again maybe include a covering letter as part of your application as well to sort of really highlight that. If you sort of do have any concerns and want to sort of stress anything that doesn't come across explicitly on your CV, then please feel free to do so.
Thank you. Got a question on ESG, so I'll probably turn it back to Ashley. How do clients check for ESG factors of their investments? So when Amundi provides investment strategies, how is ESG evaluated and presented?
Oh, that's a very big question. Yes, it's a good question. It really depends. So I've just focused my discussion mainly on sort of, I guess, the broad values of ESG, responsible investing at Amundi, and then more specifically on our passive side of the business. So in ETFs, when we present our ESG and climate ETFs to investors, we have a broad range available, and we typically present it along the let's say a scale of different intensities. So there are some clients who want, very, very high intensity ESG with a lot of exclusions. This ends up in a let's say a more concentrated portfolio of companies, because you end up excluding quite a lot of the broad index. So you could go from, maybe your starting universe might be 1,000 different companies. You would end up with only 250 companies in the resulting portfolio. And this incorporates basically a lot of external ESG data, depending on the index provider. So as I mentioned, we're tracking indices here. So when we are talking about ESG and climate, we're tracking an ESG or climate index. So we spend a lot of time basically assessing those data providers and making sure we're comfortable with their approach. So MSCI is one that we use a lot. They have hundreds of analysts who do that all day long. So they analyze companies, and they analyze the companies according to different ESG factors. And there's lots of information on the internet or on their website around how they do that. But they're very, very strong. They have a very strong setup in that research and analysis space. Now, on the active side, Amundi also has a separate independent ESG team that also do. We have a proprietary ESG rating system. We actually incorporate external rating providers. So we use MSCI as an input into that, along with 8 other providers. And then we scrub the data, we look at it, we assess it, and then we put our own rating, basically. There's more to the process than that, but it would take a long time for me to go through it today. But it's then used. So then we have an Amundi ESG rating, as well as obviously the external provider rating. So we use that, and that's how we incorporate ESG in products, just more broadly speaking. And we can also provide that information to clients across our passive portfolio. So that's fully integrated across Amundi. But when we're talking about ESG, there's a whole range of products. So it would depend on the product really that we're talking about. I think one thing just to mention quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but from a transparency perspective, it is difficult, I would say, probably for investors sometimes to navigate the full spectrum of products that are available. Like I think someone else in the question mentioned greenwashing. There are new regulations available that do allow investors to sort of help classify ESG investments. So that's called SFDR. There's Article 8 and Article 9 ESG products. We actually at Mundy, as an asset manager, have the largest number of products in both Article 8 and Article 9. And those are basically different levels of ESG investing. So you could look into that further if you were interested, but it is a way that is helping investors, I guess, understand and avoid greenwashing.
Thank you. And I would also encourage all of you to have a look at our responsible investment policy, which is available on our website, and which will go through all the detail in terms of how we manage ESG, how we integrate it, our methodology, and it's all very transparent. Thank you very much for that. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. How competitive are your internships? I think that's one for Chloe.
Unmuting would be helpful, sorry. I would say, yes, our internships are very competitive. Obviously, we do post them online through our job sites and LinkedIn, so as you can appreciate, we do get a lot of applicants through. But again, as I said, if you're able to kind of stand out and include a covering letter for that, that's always really helpful for us. Again, I think, I suppose a lot of people initially kind of want those front office roles, but as I said, we've got a real kind of varied roles that do come up across the business. So again, look at those other options perhaps as well, if maybe you're struggling to kind of get your foot in the door with those front office roles. And obviously, as we said, that they definitely don't hinder you in terms of being able to develop internally. It's always a good idea to kind of, as Olivier said, to think about what you enjoy. And maybe again, you could start your career off somewhere else and it take a slightly different path, maybe to the one that you sort of explicitly expected. But yeah, I would say competitive. But if there's a way that, as I said, that you can stand out on your application and include a covering letter, that's always very helpful.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for one more. We had a question on from one of our respondents about the culture and how French organizations are quite vertical. How can Amundi sort of foster individuals that can be agents of change? I don't know if Olivier, you want to address that one.
Well, that's a tough one. I will quote Nicholas Hamilton, who we had as a speaker. For those who know him, he's Lewis Hamilton's brother, and he's a racing driver who started, in life being disabled. So he's the only professional racing driver in the first division in the UK who actually scored points and being the first disabled athlete to do that. And his answer to the question is, we are all leaders. So to a certain degree, the organization allows for people to behave like leaders, and that's very clear. The way you go about it, it's entirely up to you. So the structure, it is true that French organizations traditionally have a very hierarchical view. Within Amundi, it will be very clear. I said it, we are very focused once the company strategy has been defined. So once we've decided on our main strategic focus, the expectation is that everybody will contribute to go in that direction. Now, we're very inclusive in two ways. The first one is that before making these decisions, management listens and gathers feedback from all employees. And we have, we've just gone recently through an exercise of surveys again on this. So we encourage employees to bring suggestions to the table. And once we have defined our strategic orientations, at that point, everybody can contribute and come with ideas or with comments or with ways to improve this. I'd say one way to see that Amundi is slightly different maybe from other organizations. I will talk about an area that I know pretty well. I will tell you one outstanding thing within Amundi is that if you look at the IT management, more than half of the IT management have started in IT, have moved to the business, and then come back to IT. So Amundi encourages people to jump from one function to another, from one silo to another, to create these bridges and to create these to nurture this collaboration mentality.
Thank you. And I think we've now run out of time. So just want to say thank you, everybody, for your time and for listening to our presentation. We hope you found it useful. As mentioned by Chloe, please do keep an eye out on our LinkedIn and jobs pages and get in contact if you have any questions. There was one on the application process. And so details which will now be available in the chat box. And also, obviously, the skills workshop will also have the links below. And just a reminder, this recording, along with all the other recordings, are added to the skills workshop website after the session. So you can also still register for all remaining upcoming sessions on the website. I think there's about 28 left to go. So look, plenty of great opportunities to hear from others in the industry, including tomorrow's session with BlackRock. So this brings the session to a close. Thank you again for tuning in, and we wish you the best in your search and hope to hear from as many of you as possible. And as a reminder, do connect with us on LinkedIn and follow the Skills Workshop for their latest updates. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.